Good evening, everybody. We are going to start the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club's Sunday night Science and Technology Net in a few seconds here. All right. And first, as we always do, let's check to see if this frequency is needed for any emergency or priority use. All right, nothing hurt. Once again, this is the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net, and I am Neil, W2NDG, transmitting from Highland, New York. And we meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. to discuss science, technology, not necessarily ham radio related, but it can be, especially tonight when we're just going to have an open topic night and see what people want to talk about. So it's been a busy week since last time we did this. Had a lot going on here. One thing, if you anybody is watching on camera or if you watch after the fact, I did rearrange the office a little bit. I thought last week when the cat was climbing on me and deciding that I needed grooming, that the background here didn't look so fantastic. So I straightened up a little bit, and although it wasn't a wreck, it's mostly that I tend to pile things on this cabinet off to my left, and it makes the whole room look cluttered when it really isn't. Yes, so last week, the cat 3 times during the video decided to come in and say hello and kind of walk back and forth across my lap. And the third time she did it, she climbed up my shoulder and started grooming me in the middle of running the net. Very, very strange stuff. So I don't know if she's going to show up tonight, but hopefully she won't decide that I need grooming again. I've been doing a lot of workbench work and had my first experience with solder paste and hot air. Although some of my fans here will say, I've got plenty of experience with hot air. It was a lot of fun, actually, and I think I may try to do some more soldering that way. And that could be one of the things I was thinking about that people could ask about and we could talk about tonight is soldering methods and welding methods, since my co-host is very well versed in that. So I know we did a whole night on adhesives when I had some issues one night, and Jim took care of that. But there's another way to stick 2 things together, and that's with metal. So we could go in that direction if everybody wants, but we'll see. And with that said, let me see if my co-host is around tonight. Jim, are you there?
Yes, Neil, I am here. And yeah, spin the wheel and see what topic comes up. And if it's welding, we'll stick with it. K2BHM.
It's definitely what we're hearing. I don't know. People hear some of the interference going on underneath everything there. And I'm really starting to wonder if we're hearing the Long Island repeater tail or not, because whatever it is, it's breaking squelch on our input and causing a courtesy tone. Really weird. Anyway, we'll see what happens as the night goes on here. All right. Let's see. I did want to comment, and I see that there is somebody on now. Okay, good. Thanks, Mike. So I have one viewer here, and what happened was last week there was somebody watching on YouTube who was chatting, and I got none of the chats. and I didn't see them until afterwards when I replayed the video looking for the cat stuff. And the chats weren't coming up during the net, which was really odd. But Mike is watching on YouTube, and he put something in the chat. So if anybody else is watching on YouTube, just throw something into the chat, and we'll see what happens. Yes, Mike, and I'm waving back at you. All right. So let's take some check-ins, and after we get check-ins, we can go around and see what people want to talk about tonight. This is W2NDG with K2BHM. Please come with your call sign, your name, and your location.
I guess I might as well. KD2, MNR, Mike in Poughkeepsie, and I'm Neil. Oh, me too. 1-3 YQ, rolling water. Net control. Here is KB2, GGF, Matt in Kerhonkson, Red Radio Ranger number 5. Over. W2GIO, Frank and Fish Match. This is November 2 Foxtrot Zulu Charlie Thomas Fish. This is KB2 or WW Mobile. Just checking in only. Net control. This is KD2 TVS Blue West Mover. Net control. WA2 RKN. Jerry. Park.
All right. Well, it's a good bunch to start. Thank you, everybody, for checking in. And I'm just checking a couple of call signs here real quick. I'm going to read the list back to you momentarily. All right. We have Jim, K2BHM in Saugerties, Mike, KD2, MNR in Poughkeepsie, Paul, N3EYQ in Frozendale, Matt, KB2GGF in Kerhonkson, Frank, W2GIO in Fishkill, Tom, N2FZC in Fishkill also. We had Bob, KB2RWW, check-in only. Safe drive out there, Bob. KD2TBS, Lou in West Milford, and WA2RKN, Jerry in Hyde Park. Anybody else this evening? All right. Sounds good. So, Jim already expressed that he'd love to talk about welding. But whatever you guys want to talk about. Let's start with Jim, because maybe he has something else he wants to bring up tonight. And Jim, anything else you want to talk about?
Actually, I didn't really plan anything because I figured you were doing open mic. Grab a topic and run with it. So it's not something you can really prepare for unless you want to sit down and read the dictionary cover to cover. But no, I'm game for anything. What everybody else wants to talk about, because other times I get to pick, so we give them this chance.
No, that's fine. All right. Mike, KD2M&R. Any suggestions for something to throw around tonight?
Well, if you want to go with welding, I mean, I don't want to say, I could go work at a place that's only welding, but I kind of could. I've done a lot of welding. I have and had a welder, and I ended up selling it to the guy I work for, so I still have access to my welder. I actually used it. When was it? Friday. We were welding a chute back together on a truck, and the guy that I work with, he can't weld, but he can cut metal and shape it pretty well and all that, and he has me do the welding. So the welder that I had was a Miller-Matic 35, very nice welder. I had one before that, but it was assembled in Mexico. It was a whole different color. It wasn't the blue. Let me drop for a second. The first one was white, and basically it was like a gray market kind of welder, and all the capacitors burned up in it. So I was actually doing stuff for my previous boss, and he said, go over to Weld and see if they have any used welders over there. So he said, you have $500 to play with. So I went over there. There was the welder that I bought, and there was no gun on it. There was no drive motor on it for the wire feed. I kept looking at it, and, I opened up the cover, and I said, there's no drive motor, there's no gun. So finally, he said, okay, $100 as is, you take it. So I gave him the $100, took it back to our shop. I took the drive motor and everything that I needed off the old welder, and I put it in the new welder, and it welds circles around the old welder. The old welder was ended up not putting anything out. So and I used that welder for a long, long time, and I sold it to my boss now, and I can use it whenever I want. I love that welder. So let me drop again. But yeah, so I can weld mostly horizontally. I've been welding a long time, and I'm just starting to get the hang of vertical welding. I will not do upside down welding. There's no way I'll do that. So if we can flip whatever over, that's what will happen. Anyway, back to you, Neil. KD2MNR.
All right, Mike. Well, Jim, there's a vote for welding. All right. Thanks. And on to Paul. N3EYQ in somewhere around Rosendale.
Well, I call it Blooming Water, which means Bloomington Fire District and Binneywater Fire District when they merged together as one fire company. They called it Blooming Water in a frenzy one night. But oh well. Welding, huh? Thermite welding, stick welding, TIG welding. Which one are you going to go over? I don't know any of it. I know how to hook up a welder to a locomotive to jump start it. Other than that, I know nothing about it. N3EYQ.
That's all right. I'm kind of lost here as well, Paul. So I can solder, which actually it's funny is when you look at some of the Chinese kits on AliExpress and even eBay, all the DIY stuff on there, and they refer to the process of putting them together as welding. So I guess it's the same word in some languages. And it really is kind of the same thing when you think about it. It's just soldering is on obviously a much smaller scale. All right. Matt, KB2 GGF in Kerhonkson. Anything you want to talk about tonight or welding?
Thanks, Neil. Good evening, everybody.
I've never done any welding. Speaking of done a little brazing, not much. I do solder. I tell a lie. I have welded on the anvil, so on the forge. So not a lot of experience there. I'm always interested to hear about it, and basics and what the beginner might encounter. But advanced stuff, I just don't copy yet. Anything that I wanted to talk about tonight? Yes, RF connectors. I am becoming increasingly unhappy with RF connectors. I'm using a lot of SO239, and I was wondering if people have opinions. I know Jerry much prefers N connectors or BNC, and I'm wondering what other people might have to say about it. Other than that, not much on my mind. So back to net, KB2GGF.
All right, Matt, thanks a lot. And yeah, there's definitely things to be said for that. I have been on a couple of discussions over the years where people were, giving their reservations of PL259, SO239 connectors, and and that it's probably not a great choice that was made to use them almost universally through our hobby when there's better available. But it seems to be where we've landed. They can be prone to failure. But we could bring that up as well tonight. Frank, W2GIO and Fishkill. Do you do any welding? I know you probably do soldering. But anything else you want to bring up and talk about tonight?
I'll kind of want to make sure I give enough time here. About a year ago, I purchased a spot welder, and basically the reason I got it was to be able to put tabs on batteries. So it's quite possible to scavenge lithium iron cells from like a laptop battery or drill. And I have a couple of drills that have lithium ion cells in them, and maybe one of the cells went bad, and there's maybe six or seven more in the pack. And so I said, well, I need a spot welder, and I've been playing around with using capacitors and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, there was one that a guy in Germany came up with, and it's really nice design. You can vary the you start off with a 12-volt battery, like a 20 amp one of these gel cells, and this thing you can adjust. It has two adjustments on it for I think current and duration. I don't remember. It's been a while. I just pulled it back out again. Anyhow, it works good, and it works good. So I think there's some knockoffs now on the web on this thing. I can dig out the information on it if anyone's interested. And the only other, recently I was doing a repair cafe, and a woman gave me a base for a statue, and fortunately it was made out of brass, and one of the legs broke off. So what I happen to have is some silver solder with the flux that comes from Home Depot. Anyhow, one of those stores, they sell it, and that works really well for silver solder, and it worked really good to put that base together. And other than that, I'm just going to be listening because I never done any really welding, but I'm kind of curious. But I think I got too many things I'm doing now already, so I'll let somebody else do that. Back to that.
All right, thanks, Frank. And yeah, I was reading through a forum recently where a guy was showing off a picture of a battery pack he put together, and they were telling him that he was lucky to be still with us. And apparently, you're not supposed to solder lithium-ion cells. Something I didn't really think of before. I'm probably glad that I didn't try it, but that does explain why they always look like they're kind of spot welded when you see them in those packs. So cool stuff, and definitely something we can talk about. All right, let's go to your neighbor, Tom, N2FCC in Fishkill. Tom, anything on the subjects that have been brought up, or do you have something else you want to bring up tonight?
To NDJ in the group, N2FCC. Never done any welding. Really don't know anything about welding. It's a pretty cool thing. My son at one time had a welder, and I was going to play with it, but didn't happen. So connectors are always interesting. Like you say, the standard connectors, the PL 259 connectors. Didn't really do too much with N connectors. Have done some with the BNCs. But connectors are interesting. The SMA and so forth. So, but I know nothing about welding and very little about connectors. This is N2FCC. Back to that.
All right, thanks, Tom. And connectors might be a good topic too, though. So because it's good to learn about them. I wish, a lot of these rigs were using something more robust than a SO239. And I've definitely had issues with some of these cables just not working right because the pins were slightly loose or something loosened up inside of the connector. Definitely can happen. All right. Bob was check-in only. So on to Lou. KD2TVS. Good evening, Lou. So you know what we're talking about so far. Any of those? Unless you have something else.
Well, good evening, all on the net tonight. Interesting. You guys shot around a lot of topics all at once. But I agree. There's much to talk about every single one of them. And I guess towards the end of what I got to say, then I got a question on for you on USR merge and as far as Linux. So I'll bring that up at the end about more or less is it good, is it bad, is it recommended or not. So let me just reset. Okay, let's see. One on the list. Welding. Wow. Welding. I haven't welded in probably from 25 to 30 years. I did take a welding class. We had welding classes, working on airplanes. One of the things they teach you in AMP, which is airframe and power plant school, is welding. Because you got to weld up tubular structures for, let's say, aircraft that are covered by fabric or whatever, and they have tubular frames. So we're taught to weld. Oxyacetylene, which is, acetylene and oxygen for regular gas welding. I really was crappy at doing that. I just couldn't get the nerve. I could do it, but it took me a lot more practice than just an hour of a shop class every day for about 30 days. Let me just reset. Well, back in the old days when I was with TWA, they sent me to Heliarc welding school, which I guess Jim probably knows. They call it TIG today, but I haven't heard that term from anybody call it Heliarc in probably as many years as I've actually since I've welded Heliarc. And I really enjoyed it, and I became good at it, welding either steel or aluminum. Talking about milling machines, that's what we used to have, the old milling machines that work, and with argon in their gas. So I got good at that, and I really enjoyed it. Guys used to come by with all little jobs. And I need this welder, I need that welder. So I jump on a welder and do what they need to do when I had a few minutes to do it for them. And used to really enjoy that, and I still do. I just haven't gotten. I wish I'd. There was one guy that I know that one of the other radio clubs, and he says anytime I wanted to use his, he got one, and I could always stop by him and practice if I wanted to. But yeah, I'd probably take him up on that one day. Maybe just reset. And let me just throw this out here too. I heard Matt mention the Red Radio Ranger. Wow. It became a Red Radio Ranger yesterday. I was just wondering which number I was, because he said I think he was number 5. Yeah, I picked up a couple of them. I was playing with Chirp and setting them up. I did one manually yesterday. I figured that Chirp is a lot more easier. I finally got understanding how to set everything up, so it all worked good. I got them both programmed. So Radio Ranger yesterday. And let me see, hot air soldering. I've seen it so many times on videos. It really intrigues me. I just like to see it done and find out how better it's done. I mean, I've seen them do it with little components on circuit boards. I guess it's better if they can point, and I guess not. I don't know if it what it does. Maybe it's better. It doesn't transfer that much heat. I would imagine it'd be the same, but there's a plus to it. But that'd be interesting in trying that out. And there was another one, spot welders. I've played with those a few times. In fact, crazy as enough, I was having a dream yesterday about last night when I was sleeping about spot welding and playing with one with somebody. I forget what we were putting together, whatever. And let's see, the last topic I guess you guys spoke about was connectors. Let me just reset quick. Connectors. I have one of those Quicksilver adapter kits I bought at a Ham Fest. It's a 30-piece thing that Quicksilver sells. Because there's one of the things that I would play with in the beginning when I first got into radios as a tech was, hey, I gotta hook this up, or I need an adapter for that to do this, that, and this. So when I saw that at the Ham Fest, I said, I need one of these. This is so easy to, I didn't get to play with it until recently got one of those Yagi antennas for catching satellites, and those had PNC connectors on it. So I had to hook up the Coax to it and use that different adapter, but it worked out pretty good. And I like it. I like that one twist quarter, and it's on and it's off, and it's easy. You don't have to worry about cross-threading everything pretty much. So I enjoyed that, and I love that kid. Can't get away from it. But so that last topic, was on that USR merge senior into the Linux world. Way more than I am, but I mean, I like playing it. I got one same computer, two of the same computers. One has the Windows 10, and the other one has the Linux. So there was an upgrade the other day. I upgraded it, and it asked whether I wanted to merge everything under that USR merge. I was just wondering, is there a plus? Is there a negative to that? And if you can't, just give me an explanation in layman's terms on what benefits it has or doesn't have. Back to you, Neil, KD2DVS.
All right. Well, a lot of stuff there. As far as hot air soldering, I can address that. I've seen all those videos too that make it look ridiculously easy. I was under no illusions that it was that easy. Those videos always make things look simpler than they are. But I tried it out on something that wasn't that critical, and I just realized that Matt asked me what this board was actually for in the last net, and I don't think I answered him. So that one of the latest projects I'm building has a main board for the main part of the project, and then there's a tone decoder board. I think I may have said encoder by mistake or on an earlier net, but it's a board that's used for the CW decode function they've added to this this device. And because that's an extra feature, and if I mess up the board, I can wait for them to send me another one, because it doesn't have to have that functionality. I figured I'd try it on there. So I had bought some solder paste a couple of weeks ago and watched a couple of videos and put it on the board and applied some heat after laying the components on top of the paste. And I learned I had to turn my airflow down because I was kind of blowing the components around a little bit. But once I got the correct ratio of heat to airflow, it worked. It worked really well. You watch the little tiny solder, like crystals or tiny bits of solder that are in the paste, and as they melt, the paste turns silvery and kind of pulls together around anything that's metal, and it's very clean. And even around a chip, when you're watching some of these videos, the guy just kind of globs the stuff on, and not being careful just to even get it on the proper pads. When you apply heat, it all draws around the pads and the leads. Really cool. And after doing a couple of components first, getting a feel for it, then I did a few more, and it was good. Then I did the chip and everything else on the board in one shot. And it looks great, and I may try it again. I didn't do the larger board that way because there's a really, really tiny Silicon Tech synthesizer chip on the board, really close spaced pins, and I didn't want to mess it up. It came pre-soldered, but it should be interesting. Let me drop. Oh, USR merge. To tell you the truth, I hadn't heard about this. I'm really not. I use Linux. I try to help people with it at work. I set systems up at work and I troubleshoot them. But I don't sit here and read all the Linux news. And yeah, I'm looking at this now. I understand what it is. I guess I understand why it's an advantage. I mean, maybe it's just because, it simplifies the root file system and makes it a little less cumbersome. I found a good article on it, and I'll have to read what their what the pro and cons are on it. But to tell you the truth, I think this is just something that the people who get bored did, so they have something else to argue about. There's nobody to kick off their lawn these days, so they need something else to argue about. I don't know. That's my take on it. I really don't see if anybody is making a huge deal over this in one direction or the other. If it doesn't really change a whole lot of functionality or cause a lot of trouble, I don't understand the big deal. But it does explain some things I was seeing when I was rooting around in the file system of the Linux machine I have here. And it does explain what I saw going on. So, all right. Thanks, Lou. And now on to Jerry, WA2RKN. Evening, Jerry. Let's see. We have welding, RF connectors, USR merge, and hot air soldering, I guess, as well.
Well, radio. Yes. Let's see how many of those I can forget. Yeah, I've done a tiny bit of welding. I took a BOSI's course years back. Thoroughly enjoyed that. I had originally gone to, I want to learn to weld aluminum, and the instructor just kind of smiled and said, "Sure, after you take the basic class." So at the time, I didn't understand it was much more difficult to solder to weld aluminum. Yes, RF connectors. Yes, I disdain UHF, so-called UHF connectors. I have a 14 ABQ vertical that I replace the UHF connector on and put an N style in. Mostly though, I'll go with adapters rather than bothering to change the connector on equipment. Once or twice I have though, but you know, I'd rather go the adapter route. It's easier. Yeah, welders. Wow, I didn't know that you use them to start a locomotive. That's good to know. You know how you can limp a car with the starter motor? Can you do that with a locomotive too? Can you limp the loco down the track with a welder a little bit? And where did you say they parked those locomotives anyway? WA2RKM back to that.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Thanks, Jerry. And yeah, as far as the connectors, you know, let's say I decided I wanted to go and, you know, basically change everything I do over to N connectors, which are a lot more reliable. Yeah, I'm not going to pop open my 7300 and, you know, change the bulkhead connector to an N connector. Although on some of these rigs, it's probably not that hard to do. It's one of those things, if I had to go and sell it, I'd probably want to change it back, you know. It's just one of those things. It may be superior, but people just, you know, like, what's that? Now what do I do? I think it would just annoy most of the end users out there. Locomotive. Yeah, I just had this vision when you were talking about that of, you know, not jump starting, but pop starting a locomotive. And I can see, you know, Paul, you know, one foot up in the control cab and the other foot on the ground, you know, pushing the locomotive along the track, getting ready to pop the clutch and start it. I'm guessing that they don't work that way. But, oh, hey, you know, if you get one going on the tracks fast enough, you can use it to activate your flux capacitor and return home to the year you came from. Sorry about that, folks. W2NDG. And is there anybody else who'd like to check in tonight for the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net? Please come now. All right, nothing heard. Let's go back up to Jim for comments and see if there's anything here he wants to expand on. Go ahead, Jim, K2BHM.
Thanks, Neil. Well, the first thing that caught my interest was user merge. I've never heard of it before. I did a quick search on it here, and it's something new that came out, and it looks like it has something to do with the user directory, combining different things that were separate directories under the user directory. And I have no clue why they would want to do that or what benefit it is or anything like that. You heard of anything about that?
No, I did the same thing you did when Lou brought it up, because it hasn't really entered my you know, circle of awareness here. And as I said, I think this is something for the Linux curmudgeons that they started to complain about because there aren't enough people to kick off of their lawns.
That's about as good an explanation as any. Apparently, it's some new feature under Debian. I haven't seen it in Ubuntu. Actually, never saw it before anywhere. So it's got to be something new, and I have no clue why you would want to do that. What the benefit is. They were probably set up like that for a certain reason, and I don't know why you would want to change it. Other than to screw up backward compatibility. But anyhow, maybe we should address the connector problem, because once we get into welding, that's going to be a big, long deal. What's your vote?
We could touch on welding a little bit, see what people want to hear about it. We've got the most common things brought up here were welding and connectors.
Yeah, well, when you start talking about welding, there's soft soldering, there's silver soldering, there's brazing, there's TIG welding, there's stick electrode, there's submerged gas welding, there's MIG welding, there's spot welding. The different processes, the different materials, the different gases. It's a whole semester.
No, definitely. So I don't know how you want to approach that, or we could do promise a whole night on that. And have you run into the thing about lithium ion cells and not supposed to that you're not supposed to solder them, that it's dangerous?
Yeah, definitely. We use a lot of lithium ion batteries, LiPo batteries for model airplanes and stuff like that. Extremely high current density, but extremely fussy. They're basically a 3.7 volt battery. If the voltage goes up too high or they're discharged too low, they can fail internally, which generates an internal short, which with the current density of the battery, it generates a whole lot of heat. They've been known to burn houses down. You drop. You remember a while back there was all issues about the Galaxy cell phones and laptops and so forth. The batteries burning up and setting the whole thing on fire, and they were barred from airplanes and stuff like that. This technology is very delicate, and usually there is a computer in the battery and a computer in the charger, and they talk to each other to monitor different parameters, and so that they don't overcharge or undercharge and cause a dramatic event. And that was the issue with the laptop batteries. Some of the cheap Chinese rip-off batteries didn't have the computer in the battery for the charger to get its information from. Yeah, they don't solder them anymore. They spot weld tabs to it, and by spot welding jumpers from one to the other. And that spot welder is pretty delicate because you don't want to generate too much heat, and you got to have enough to get a good solid contact. So it's tricky. Back to you, K2BHM.
All right. Yeah, it's just something, it does make sense to me, but it's something I never thought of, and I'm glad that I had read a warning about it before I actually tried it, because I could see how that could go horribly wrong. Yes, I mean, I've been in IT long enough to be on some of the recall end when some of the batteries were failing, and we've certainly had numerous MacBooks brought, into the room at a couple of jobs where the MacBook was bulging, either the keyboard popping out of the top or the back coming off, and that can get dangerous as well. The case with the Samsung Galaxy Note phone a number of years ago wasn't a charging issue. I mean, it was, but it was a mechanical thing, was that they had designed the phone without any tolerance in the area that held the battery. You're supposed to leave a little bit of room for expansion around the battery, a slight bit of tolerance. And they had designed it so tight that upon assembly, the battery was, mechanically sandwiched on all sides. And on a fast charge, because that's when, fast charges started to come out, and the battery was heating up and would expand slightly. The phone restricted the expansion, and boom. That energy has to go somewhere. So that's what happened with that one.
Yeah, okay, which basically points out that these batteries are delicate. They have a certain way that they like to be treated, and if they aren't, they react violently. A battery, about the size of a stick of chewing gum. If you set the thing out on the table with the charger and it decides it doesn't like things and goes south, it can and has set the table on fire, which burned the house down. From a little tiny thing like that you wouldn't give a second thought to, because we're used to playing around with AA cells and AAA cells and throw them in the charger and stuff like that, and you don't give it a second thought. But these guys here have a much higher energy density, so they have much higher potential to generate heat and explode into fire. Dare say it might be equivalent to like a quarter stick of dynamite.
Definitely. W2NDG with K2BHM on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. And there are lithium-ion batteries in so many things we use around the house now. And we don't really think about this stuff. But, I'm going to think about something right now. It's something that crossed my mind. What is one of the smallest lithium-ion battery devices that people are starting to use more and more in everyday life? And your hint would be, I see them quite often on my commute, on the train, on the subway, or people walking around the city. I own a pair of them myself, actually more than one.
Let me guess. Stick in your ear.
Yes. So as they say, true wireless earbuds. And when you think about how small they are, there's still a lithium-ion battery in that thing. And you're sticking it in your ear, and it's tight up against your head. Definitely not something I'd like to have let loose. But yes, it's probably going to happen while they're charging, most likely. But there are cases where things have gone wrong. But yeah, I have a pair, and so many other things that run on those batteries around here. And the thing is that 99.9% of the time they are safe. But it's those cases where you buy inferior product or you don't treat it correctly that things will go horribly wrong. All right. And on the subject of connectors, I know we were talking about end connectors, and the other one that pops up in ham radio a lot is the BNC connector. And I think I know what BNC stands for. How about you, Jim?
Well, the B stands for bayonet because of the bayonet lock, and it's a probably N because it's a miniature N format connector.
So, let's see. Bayonet Neil Conselman is what it says here on Wikipedia. It's interesting as there are some, there's definitely other stories out there. It's one of those things that, there's probably, urban legend things as far as where the name came from. The one that I had originally heard, which I guess is probably not correct, was British Naval Connector.
Let's see if I got it. Yeah, I've never heard that one. I know I've also used TNC, which is basically a BNC connector with a threaded nut on it instead of the bayonet. But basically the PL259 and the SO239 were popular back, 60, 70, 80 years ago. That was the thing back in the 40s and the 50s. And actually, it is a very poor excuse for a connector. Once you start getting up in frequencies, the characteristic impedance of the coax that we're using for the antennas, that is determined by the ratio of the OD of the center conductor and the ID of the outer shield, among other things. You'll notice that the size of RG58U, which is 52 ohms, is much smaller than RG59U, which is 75 ohms, which is the typical cable TV. The F connectors, the BNC, the N connectors, they all try and maintain that ratio of center conductor to shield. Let me drop a second. So anytime there's a discontinuity in a coax line, there will be a impedance mismatch. There will be images and reflections sent back down. So you really want to maintain that integrity, which is what the BNC and the N and the SMA connectors all try and do. And the PO59 says, I don't care. You got continuity, so be happy with that. So that's why the other ones became a lot more popular, VHF, UHF, repeater use and stuff like that. I don't know, did you want to continue on this topic, Neil? K2BHM.
Yeah, we can. And we can, I just bought a crimping kit at the Limemark Hamfest at the end of last year. Because I'm going to need to be making up some cable runs as I get these antennas installed at some point, and maybe make my own jumpers. And, it's the guy who sells this kit swears that it's the best way to put your cables together as long as you have the proper crimping equipment. And it's not cheap. And a lot of people have trouble soldering the cable ends on the correct ends and making them work correctly. So, and there's certainly something to be said for doing this the best way you can and the right way you can. What's really scary is, we talk about PL259 versus N versus BNC, but have you ever picked up, and I know you have, like a really old basic novice rig from Heathkit or some of these other radios? And what was the antenna connector on a lot of those?
Let me guess, RCA phono.
Yes. And they're funny. Definitely hard to imagine that they thought that was a good idea. But I guess in its day they didn't really have a lot of other, good and affordable choices. I don't know. So, we can continue on the connector route, and if you want to do welding night at some point and organize, an oral presentation and something to talk about, we can go in that direction.
Well, I'm thinking that we're out an hour into it now, so it probably would be best to dedicate a whole night to soldering, because there's so many different avenues to go down. So look at how much we played with connectors. Just talking about a PO259. Speaking about it, remember the old Motorola antenna connectors that were on all the AM radios years past? And then General Radio, all of their laboratory equipment had those large, cumbersome either-way connectors. The connector was both male and female, so no matter which one you grabbed, it would plug into the other one. So a lot of history in connectors. Back to you, K2BHM.
K2GIO.
Oh, Frank. I'm sure you have plenty of comments on this. I'll mention, yes, the Motorola connector. Yeah. All the scanners. That was a big one among the scanners. Frank, you can throw something in now, or we're going to do the rotation again one more time. So up to you.
I just want to mention just two things quickly. I did some TDR measurements on UHF connectors, especially the double female barrels, and they come out to 35 ohms. The other thing is, one of the things that we don't probably pay too much attention to is in the normal transceiver world, but in the repeater world, we have to consider passive intermodulation, where when you pass RF power to a connector, and it's got made with nickel, it sings a little bit, and then next thing you know, you're getting descents on your receiver. So also that could be an issue if you're trying to do satellite and in the single sideband or CW mode, the linear satellites. You have to be a little careful about that too, because then you'll be making noise that you didn't want. So anyhow, PIM is a tricky one. In the repeater world, you got to pay attention to it big time. Back to that.
W2NDG on the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Talking about connectors, I guess. So, well, thanks, Frank. Yeah. The former engineer of all of the repeaters and everything down on Long Island for the LIMARC group passed away a couple of years ago, Eric, and he was also engineer for the area PBS stations, and quite the brilliant guy. But when we had a session on connectors at one of the last live Ham Radio University events, he brought a connector from one of the TV transmitters that was, the size of like a stock pot. I mean, interesting stuff. And I can only imagine, you try to think of how much power goes through something like that. All right. So back up to the top of the check-in list, KD2MNR, Mike. I think we'll just do one trip through the rotation again and call it there. Anything you want to add tonight about connectors or something else you want to bring up real quick?
No, not really. I can't really get into it. I've only done PL259s and like that, but I've never got into B&C or the N-type or whatever. I do have a radio that was N, and I got the adapter to go to, with the SO239 on the other side of it, so that it would accept the PL259. Other than that, no. And yeah, so I'm going to say goodnight. And apparently you're pretty big in Russia. That looks like Russian, doesn't it? Anyway, KD2MNR. Good night, all. We'll talk to you guys later. 73s. Back to you, Neil.
All right. Good night, Mike. And yeah, I bumped them pretty much every time the last few weeks of the YouTube channel gets spammers. So, but that last one isn't Russian. That's Alec, KD2YFU, who's on here watching. So, so I wanted to mention real quick a couple things that popped up on the news while I was sitting here. Actually, right before we went live, my daughter had told me that Bob Saget passed away today, but even more recent, they just reported that oh God, and I can't think of his first name. Hold on a moment. The Woodstock organizer, Lang. I can't think of his name, but he just passed away, and that was reported like an hour ago. Michael Lang. Sorry, a little bit of a mental block there. Just passed away at the age of 77 of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. So, all right. And on that down note, sorry, let's go over to N3EYQ, Paul. Your experience with connectors, I guess, and I don't know if you appreciated my pop starting a train joke.
Well, I only know of one locomotive you can do that with, and that's off on the Catskill Railroad. It's got a diesel engine. No, I wouldn't want to. It's got a diesel engine, mechanical transmission, the whole nine yards. It's not a diesel electric. Diesel electrics are a little interesting. You can reverse the current. They reverse the current. Traction motors can be turned into generators, but you need a trigger. What do they call it? I'll think about it. Yeah, you can't do that. It's hard, but you can't do that. No. It won't spin the. I'm using my red radio. Hey, if I use my red radio, do I need to? Does that have to be emergency or like the red phone on Batman? I don't know. No, welders have a voltage of like between 75 and 90 volts, and it's about right to recharge the batteries on a locomotive, so you can restart it with the batteries. You need a lot more than the 100 amps to get the thing to spin over. N3YQ back to net.
No, thanks, Paul. Yeah, I figured there must be something out there that works like that, but it didn't seem like it was going to be very possible. All right, Matt, KB2GGF. Connectors, I guess.
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, connectors. Some interesting info and thanks. And my immediate concern with connectors is I am very religious about disconnecting my radios when not in use and putting the antenna leads to ground. And there's a lot of unscrewing and screwing on with the PL259s. And the cable, they wear out. I find the center conductors eventually break, usually near, 3/4 of an inch down from the tip, or a half inch down from the tip. I solder the tip to the inside connector, of course. And I've just had a lot of trouble with them, and don't like them. So I'm trying to find something a little more robust. So if someone has an idea about that, that would be very much appreciated. Other than that, not much to say. So really interesting net, and thank you very much, everyone. And 73s, KB2 GGF.
All right, thanks, Matt. And yeah, it's that constant taking them off and putting them back on also. And I know they make the little push on quick disconnect PL239 adapter ends, and my experience with them hasn't been great. I find that frequently I'll use one and the center pin isn't making 100% contact, or they'll come apart on me and leave part of themselves in the connector I was pushing it into. Maybe I'm buying the wrong ones. I've tried different ones. I've searched through Dave Snyder's assortment of them, even asking him and Gary at the Hamfest, do you have a better quality one? And they picked a couple out that they thought were better. Still not happy with them. So, that the push-on way, it made sense for like our TV F connectors when we would get those push-on cables, but just doesn't work as much and as well in ham radio. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for checking in. Frank, W2GIO, we heard you a little before. Anything more on connectors?
W2GIO. Yeah, and the only other thing is there are some connectors that are waterproof. The BNC and N connectors are waterproof. And that's about all that waterproof, you could use a BNC or an end connector. And there's probably ways of taping up a UHF connector, but that's another story. It's up to the imagination. I think that's it. SMAs, there's no provision that I see in those connectors for waterproof. So they may make a nice solid connection, but there's nothing that says that they're waterproof. I don't think they had it. There was no intention of making them waterproof because they were meant more for test equipment. At least that's my experience. Okay, W2GIO.
All right, thanks, Frank. Yeah. Someone even told me once that the SMA is even a better connector than the PL259 and can be made to do almost as much. I don't know. I probably wouldn't want to put a couple hundred watts through one for sure. So most of the time they're used with that super lightweight RG cable. And I know that stuff is usually not rated much beyond 50. So I think whoever told me that wasn't giving me the whole story. But yeah, I wasn't thinking about that. SMAs are probably not waterproof, but I guess they could be. If you think about it, it wouldn't be hard to have a gasket in the base of that connector. That could actually work. But yes, Ns and BNCs are a little more nice to the weather. And for the PL259s, like a lot of you, I have, a package of Coax seal somewhere, and that self-annealing, self-adhesive tape that you stretch around a connection like that. And as it exposes to the air, it gets harder and it sticks to itself. So that stuff's handy. Okay, N2FCC, Tom. I know you said you didn't have much to talk about in the connector world, but maybe you have questions or maybe you've had some experiences.
Good evening again, N2FCC. Well, I've taped up the PL259s and kept all the water out. I've had antennas or connections that are like 10 years old, and when I go to replace it, after you get the knife and cut all the stuff off, they look almost brand new. So you can be done right. That's about all I got. N2FCC back tonight.
All right, thanks, Tom. That's fine. You just reminded me of something else. I know that we discussed when we were taking apart somebody's old antenna system, Silent Key, a while back, and we were helping his widow clean up the backyard. Getting the antennas out and everything else. And we had run most of the cabling for the two antennas through PVC, and there was a discussion about why that's good and why it's bad. And if we're trying to keep water out of the connectors, one of the problems with PVC is it's almost, on a run this long, it's almost impossible to keep it watertight over a long period of time when it's buried. And sometimes you may end up making the issue with moisture worse with your connectors by doing that, because that pipe quite frequently is just going to fill up with water. So different ways to look at it, obviously. But alrighty. Thanks, Tom. And Lou, KD2TVS. All right. So we landed on connectors, Lou, and more comments on, I guess, the user or USR merge.
Yeah, Neil, thanks for the comments on the USL merge. It didn't seem, well, from what I read up on it, that it was a big deal. I don't know why. It was just a message in a box that gave you the choice doing it on the Linux Mint upgrade on Linux Mint. So we'll leave it at that. Probably not that important, but just saying, like you said, somebody needs to make an argument about something, or guess I know the concern of I forget who it was that mentioned about disconnecting his feed line every time he was done. I guess for lightning safety or whatever. I mean, during the summer I usually do. I pull. I never thought about it. I guess you eventually think about it. Let me just reset. That you'll cause wear, connecting, reconnecting like any connector. I mean, got to be a better way of doing it to going into ground, but lightning doesn't care which way it goes. Of course, static, I guess it'll jump around anyway. But it's got to be a better way for him to actually be safe. I usually disconnect them in the summer. Right now, I haven't because I only worried about the lightning in the area, static and stuff like that. So back to you, Neil. KD2 TV.
All right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something I think that's going to come up again, maybe on one of Dave's Thursday night nets, and we can talk about it some more. I'll have more experience to share on, soldering versus crimping when I start getting into that, and different types of coax. One of the things that I'm trying to do here is to get this antenna that I'm using right now up higher, and I had a crazy idea of raising it up into the tree with a stabilizing cord and running the coax down. But for a VHF UHF antenna, I wanted something a little more robust than just cheesy coax. I bought about 100 feet of what Quicksilver calls USA 400, or USA Flex, I believe, was the stuff I got, which is a stranded center version of LMR 400. So it's a little more flexible, and it's definitely variable, and it's low loss at higher frequencies. I thought it would work really well for this. So if I can pull this off, it's going to take my Edfong tri-band stick and put it up about 50 feet in the air. And that should work quite well here. Get me away from a little bit of the noise as well. So we'll see how that works. Some of those giant connectors they use, in professional broadcasting are really impressive. And I'm sure there's a special wrench they use, to get them off and on. Definitely interesting. And if you do Ham Radio University, which was this past Saturday, so it would be next year, they came up in the connectors forum that OMARC usually does. And I know they did it again this year, but I haven't watched it. And for those of you who do want to catch some of this, HRU posted all of the videos this year. They're all up there, which is great, including the two I did. Last year, they never got all of them up. I did manage to get copies of mine from last year, though. But this year, they're all up there. And there's some really good stuff that you can browse through and see the videos after the fact. So, all right. And last on the list, if we haven't put you to sleep, Jerry, I'm sorry, not a riveting conversation tonight. Wait, we're not talking about riveting. We're talking about welding. Right, Jerry? No. Connectors. And yeah, you did bring up, using end connectors or something more robust than an SO239. And I think on a rig that I'm not planning on getting rid of for a very long almost timed out there, or maybe I did, but on a rig I'm not planning on getting rid of ever or for a long time. I might change the bulkhead. I don't know. Have to see what's involved. So go ahead, Jerry. You're last on our list tonight.
Hello, radio. A couple of things. The SDR merge thing, I don't follow this on a day-to-day, week by week, or anything like that, but it pops up in the tech groups now and then. Yes, they're rearranging the file architecture a little bit. And I think what all the kerfuffle is that people are really sensitive about this because of the previous flap with System D, where it's going against base philosophy of Linux and Unix. So it seems to be like a one-man show running System D and bad feelings. Rangers, be advised that the chairman has raised the radio prices 10%. Yes, that's right, $21.99 now. So the party is over, folks. Pick up your hod, carry the manure back up the hill. Way too arcane back to that.
Thanks, Jerry. I didn't realize how many of these things I must have sold for Amazon. It was pretty funny. And I had mine over my left shoulder here next to this Raspberry Pi 7-inch terminal here, sitting here. And I pointed it out in the first forum. Is that if there's anybody from OMARC watching, my red radio is making a guest appearance. So it all went well with that. And actually on the other radio that we were all talking about, I've been playing with Linux all day. And if Matt is still listening, I have to tell you, Matt, I have given up on that front. I couldn't get VirtualBox working the way I wanted to either. It runs fine. I just can't get it to do any USB pass-throughs. So much for that plan. I found a script that'll fix it, but the installation I did was so slow that getting anything done on it is just taking forever. So I'll try this on a more robust computer during the week. But for now, I grabbed one of my old Windows laptops, and that's how I'm going to program this thing. So we'll go from there. I will report back. All right. And thank you, everybody, for the talks on connectors and a little bit on Linux and a little bit on soldering and welding. And let's see if there's anybody else out there who wants to check in at the end of the net. All right. I want to thank everybody for checking in tonight and stopping by. We'll try to do maybe a more focused topic next Sunday. And Jim and I can throw that back and forth as to what we want to do. And we'll try to notify everybody in advance so you can brush up on whatever it is we're going to talk about. I know I don't always do that, but maybe we'll see what we can do for next week. All right. Let me drop and pass it over to Jim for final words.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Neil. K2BHM Jim here. Interesting about the locomotives. That's another interesting technology. Like Paul was saying, the Catskill Mountain Railroad, the original locomotives were diesel engine, mechanical transmission, and power sent down to the wheels mechanically. And then they went to diesel electric. And jump-starting it with a welder, that's interesting. Your typical stick arc welder, it's basically a current supply. You set it for 75 amps and it wants to deliver 75 amps and doesn't really care what the voltage is. Normally open circuit voltage when you're welding is 16, 18, 20 volts, whatever. It depends on the arc length, how fast you're pushing it. So that would just sit back and try and deliver whatever current it could to the batteries. So interesting. One more comment, let me drop. Yeah, the more recent technology was the diesel engine runs a generator, which generates a voltage, and then some sort of relays or solid state now controls the DC down to the motors on the trucks. They were permanent magnet brush motors. Had some pretty healthy brushes in them, but nowadays they're going into variable frequency drives. So you take the generator on the diesel engine, rectify it, make DC, and then break it up into three-phase AC to run the motors. A lot more efficient. And what he was talking about with the braking, the motor will act like a generator and send DC up to a great big stainless steel resistor up in the roof. It has huge blowers, and that's how they do a lot of their braking. So, interesting technology there too. With that, I think we're pretty much exhausted things and ready to call it a night. Back to you, Neil, K2BHM.
Well, the braking technology almost sounds like hybrid technology in cars. Makes you wonder where they got the idea, right?
Yeah, dynamic braking is fairly old. Difference is with cars, the computer uses that to recharge the batteries, and with the locomotive, there's no battery, so it's just waste energy. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, retired GE engineer, somebody changed the design of the insulators for the stainless steel, and they were failing. And when it failed, the dynamic braking dummy load was shorting out. And so the solution was to change out all these insulators. Turned out to be $1 million job per locomotive. So he was able to write software to predict when that failure was going to happen and only change it on the ones that were in imminent danger. So, interesting. K2BHM.
And 3 UIQ comments.
Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, he's right on the money on that. Yeah. Dynamic. They call it dynamic braking. It goes into resistor grid. So yeah, exactly. It's wasted energy.
Cool. This is definitely something we could go on about one night. I know we have a lot of enthusiasts. So, all right. Pretty cool. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Paul. And let's close things out. You have been listening to the OMARC Sunday Night Science and Technology Net with Neil W2NDG, myself, and K2BHM, Jim from Saugerties. We meet here every Sunday night at 8 p.m. to talk about science and technology, not always ham radio related, but usually something interesting. Please stop by if you're just catching us at the end here. And you don't need to be a member of the Overlook Mountain Amateur Radio Club to join in any of these nets. But we do encourage you to come check out our website and see what we're all about. And you can find that at omarcclub.org, omarcclub.org. And we invite you to attend the other nets that this club sponsors and takes care of. And let me drop. They are as follows. Every morning at 8:35 a.m., a rotating cast of OMARC characters hosts the 8:35 on the 8:05, a net started by Paul ACTUQ and Bob K2LD at the beginning of the pandemic as an expansion of a regular morning chat they used to have. And keeping in that tradition, it is a casual roundtable net, not a directed net. We wanted to make sure everybody was in touch and okay and being social, and the net provided that functionality, and it still does to this day. And it's a lot of fun. And as Dave always says, it goes well with your morning coffee. Every evening at 6:30 p.m., we also host the 6:30 p.m. check-in net, also hosted by a rotating group of net control hosts. That net is a directed net, but still a casual directed net, and serves much of the purpose as the morning net. People check in, talk about what they did during the day, and bring up any problems they might be having or any assistance they might need. Please stop by. Every Monday night now at, I believe, 8 p.m. is the Ulster and Northern Duchess Readiness Net, a group of safety-conscious hams and emergency prepared hams who want to make sure that we are all prepared in the event of something going south. We're not affiliated with a specific emergency organization at this time, but we are preparing our members for that eventuality. And it's a good net. They like to experiment with alternate methods of communication and just making sure people understand what it means to be ready to react in the event of an emergency. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., our club president, Dave, K2JLV, hosts the Thursday Night Tech Net, similar to this net, but usually more ham radio or sometimes computer ham radio related. Dave takes check-ins and looks for a topic or a troubleshooting issue. If nothing arises in the first rotation, he spins the topic wheel and comes up with one for us. It's a lot of fun. Usually runs well into the evening, sometimes 4 or 5 rounds of the check-ins. Please come by and check it out. And finally, we have started our first HF Net that we sponsor. Paul, ACTUQ, started on Wednesdays at 4:30. The Hudson Valley Hf Net, usually held on 3835 kilohertz in the 75 meter band. At 4:30 p.m., Paul starts looking for check-ins and then usually does a couple of rounds through the check-ins. It's been a very successful net so far with people checking in from multiple states. And please come by if you have an HF rig. You don't need 100 watts to check in, as some of our members have proved to us. So come check it out. And that's it for me. We're going to get off the repeater here and return it to normal use. I am Neil, W2NDG in Highland, and we are closing the Overlook Mountain Sunday Night Science and Technology Net. Please feel free to use the repeater. I'll hang out as usual for 5 or 10 minutes if anybody has anything they want to talk about. Have a good night. 7-3 all.
Hey, with everybody with the red radios, do we need to have an emergency to use the red radios?